Welcome to the Hypertech Voices of Industry here at the Hypertech booth in the Central Hall at SEMA 2022. My name is Clarence Barnes, and it's not often you get to see someone who's been so much of a keystone of SEMA. There are famous people walking the halls, and builders and contractors and racers and people from all over the world come to SEMA every year, but SEMA started a while ago, and one of the guys who is in the Hall of Fame, he was inducted in 1981. It's got the entire history of SEMA because he was at the beginning, and it's Bob Spar. Bob, I am so thrilled to have you here because you're the guy who knows the story behind the story.
Yes, I do.
And there is a story to that because SEMA was, we all come here every year and it's endless. I think it's the biggest show to come to Las Vegas now, from worldwide audience and everything like that. And this year is incredible. But it always wasn't this big, right?
Oh, no. And we would have never in our wildest dreams thought it would be 1% of what we see here.
So what was the story behind the story? Because I know you started out as like building transmissions and mechanic and things like that, right? I mean,
yeah,
we know. Okay, so backing up a little bit, this is Bob Spar from B&M, the B in B&M. I wanted to say that because it goes back to when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You were nobody unless you had a B&M shifter, and if you were somebody, you had the B&M transmission in your 69 Chevelle SS.
Right.
Was a very big show at Epping Dragway. Even though 14 seconds at Epping on Wednesday nights was a big deal. Now a Jetta does that, not to take it. But you were a big part of that.
Yeah.
But I know, it wasn't always B&M. It wasn't always, name and light stuff.
Oh, no. No, I started out as an auto mechanic, working at a garage on the 4-floor plan from Hollywood High School. And then when I graduated, a few months later, I started a business with my partner, Mort Schumann. And the way we started was working in his garage at night and on the weekends, saving money so that we'd have rent, be able to pay the rent and the first month's security in the shop. And eventually we started, and I got drafted into the Army, and Mort was going to close the shop. My brother just graduated from high school. He came to work for Mort for nothing, for $15 a week, just so that there'd be another pair of hands to pay the rent. Mort was 10 years older than me, and he had a wife and 2 kids, and he had to bring home the money. So anyway, so I got drafted. I got out of the Army 2 years later, and my brother and I, at that time, and Mort, we were still fixing cars. And we were working on modifying the transmissions and testing at night and on the weekends, and then eventually we got to the point where we thought we were ready to go and start selling them, and so we started trying to sell the transmissions, and in order to do that, sometimes we had to help the guy build the car, and so we'd be working nights, Sundays, and so forth. Eventually Mort wanted to get out because he said, "You guys have a different dream than me. I just want to fix cars." So we bought him out. We were going to I wanted to change the name to B&D because my brother's name is Don. My brother didn't want to do that because we had 5 years invested in it, so we kept it at B&M. But anyway, so we were building drag race cars for Dick Harriman, and actually we built John Masmanian's 41 Willies. We built K.S. Pittman's 41 Willies. We built K.S. Pittman's 33 Willies. We built a lot of cars, mostly so that we'd have a showcase for our transmissions.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
You're a small business. You're working together with, a very small team, probably working paycheck to paycheck as we know it today. Like, ooh, trying to pay rent and things like that. You were with a small group of guys at the very beginning of, so what was before SEMA? Because you were at the beginning, right?
Yes. Actually, around 1960, I met Phil Wyant.
Right.
Because he had a little foundry and he was going to make some parts for us. And so he invited us to come to a meeting at a hotel.
Right.
And it was put on by the Credit Managers Association. So this little meeting, and there were maybe 10 or 12 of us, was a group of manufacturers, Wyand, me, Douglas muffler, one of the very first muffler companies.
Wow.
Scotty Finn, one of the first dragster guys.
This is the
Yeah.
original crew.
And
wow.
And the reason for these meetings was to discuss credit issues, because we were starting to, people in the industry were starting to sell product across the country, and
Right.
some of the people wanted credit. Everything we did was COD. We'd send a deposit in, and then we'd
Give me the
ship the
money.
transmission,
Yeah,
collect the
we're
money.
paying our rent.
And
Yeah.
I didn't have any reason to be at these meetings, but Phil said, oh, yeah, you ought to be there. So I went. And then after the meetings, we would sit around in the bar and talk about the fact that we ought to have a manufacturers association, and gee, wouldn't it be neat, and so forth. But we could just never kind of pull it together. Because one of the reasons is because there were competitors in the industry, you know, like say the clutch guys. There was Schieffer, Hayes, Weber,
Wow.
2 or 3 other ones,
Big
and they all
guys.
hated each other,
Wow.
and they wouldn't talk to each other. So it was difficult to try to get a group together. So I went to the drag races at Indianapolis, 1961, I think, and with 3 or 4 of our cars, guys that were running our transmissions, K.S. Pittman, John Masmanian, Stone Woods and Cook. I can't remember, another guy named Waldo Hirschfield.
Wow.
And we were going through the tech line, and they wouldn't let us run because we didn't have scatter shields over the bell housing.
Right.
And so we go, wait a minute, we don't need a scatter shield, we don't have a clutch.
Right. Right.
So he said, well, you can't run without a scatter shield. So I went to the NHRA office, which was a Quonset hut, and I sat there all day waiting to talk to somebody. And now it's about 7 o'clock at night. I'm the last guy in the place, and a guy walks down the hall, and he walks up to me, and he says, have you been taken care of? And I said, no. I've been here all day.
I'm very patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what's the problem? And he introduces himself, and his name was Jack Hart, and he was the number 2 guy at NHRA.
Worth the wait.
Right under Wally Parks.
Very much worth the wait.
Yeah. So I tell him my story, and he says, well, meet us out under the olive tree or the pine tree with some kind of tree
Right.
down at the finish line at the drag races tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and I'm going to have all 7 of my division directors there, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to explain your case.
Wow.
And if you can convince those guys, we'll let you run without scatter shields. And if you can't, you got to have scatter shields.
Right.
So, okay. So I meet, I talk to my 5 minutes. They send me away. They talk. They bring me back, and they say, okay, you can run. So all our guys were allowed to run without scatter shields.
Wow.
So, okay, now we're going back to the Credit Managers Association, and then in the bar after the meetings, and we're talking about, you know, NHRA's got a rule book coming out, and in the rule book they're mentioning that you can only run this kind of manifold and that kind of clutch and that kind of this, and you got to pay Wally off to get in the book.
Wow.
And
wow.
and
Wow.
so some of the rest of us are going, oh wow, gee, that's really bad. You know,
Yeah.
that's really terrible. We need a manufacturers association so we can go to Wally with some power and
Yeah.
tell him you can't do that. And I said, well, you know, maybe our cause is we should focus on safety issues. You know, we're talking about this scatter shield. So now I'm going back at the races to Indianapolis. I talk to Jack Hart. I meet with the guys. They say we can run. About 4 weeks later, maybe 2 weeks later, I get a call from Jack Hart. Let's have lunch. I go have lunch with Jack Hart, and we start talking about there really ought to be a manufacturers association. I mention it, and he jumps right on it. There really should be. There should be one voice where we, NHRA, could go and say, what's the issue with this? Which clutch should we recommend? And then we started talking about safety features, and that should be the criteria. Nothing other than safety should be the criteria. Well, how are we going to establish these safety criteria? Well, if we had a manufacturers association, we could form groups out of that association. And just as an example,
You see where this is going, right? Pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah, and so Jack Hart and I start having lunch about every week or two, and we're getting deeper and deeper. And in the meantime, I'm reporting back to Phil Wyand and Willie Gardner, who's in the credit manager. I'm telling them what's going on, and they're going, "Yay, Bob, keep it up!"
Yeah,
you know?
keep going, Bob.
And so finally, we get to the point where, okay, here's what we need. We need a manufacturers association, and we need a group called the technical committee. And the technical committee is going to start establishing minimum specs for different safety related products. Number one product, clutches and flywheels, because that was an issue.
Yeah.
So my job was to get Hayes and Weber and Schieffer
To talk. to talk. Yeah.
but I go to them and I say, "Look, guys, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm an automatic transmission guy. I don't build clutches.
Yeah.
But we need to come up with minimum specs for the NHRA so they know what they can allow to run and what they can't." So Paul Schieffer, who was a wonderful, wonderful guy and had become my friend, even though we were competitors, so to speak.
Yeah.
He loans me his number one guy, Holly Hedrick, and he said, "Holly will help you organize this thing," which he did. And actually, he did most of the work. I was the voice. He was the guy doing the work. So we called meetings of all these clutch guys together, and it was difficult getting them in the same room, but we did because we had a reason to be there.
Yeah. No, that's clever. That's
And they argued among them about which was the best material and which was the best heat treat and which was the best this and which was the best that. And from those arguments, we developed minimum specifications. And I go to Jack Hart, I say, "How's that? How you like that?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Perfect."
Wow.
Perfect. So we formed SEMA. There's kind of a sidebar here. People say SEMA was formed by Revell Toy Company.
Really?
Well, indirectly, yes. So here's a sidebar.
Wow.
So there was a guy that eventually worked for Peterson Publishing Company. His name was Dick Day. Dick Day worked for AMT. They were a toy car manufacturer.
Right.
And they came to my shop, and everybody else, I'm sure, and they wanted exclusive rights to replicate cars like K.S. Pittman, Doug Cook, Stone Woodson Cook, and deep B&M decals. We had to authorize them to do it, and so we did. 2 weeks later, the Revell guy shows up, and he wants the same thing, and we say, we already signed up with AMT. So they realize they're late. So apparently one of the Revell guys was very good friends with one of the early manufacturers, Els Loan from Ilco. I don't know if you even know that name because it's gone now, but it was big in the 60s. He had little footprints all over the place, and there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
See those decals all over the place, little footprints? That was him, Els Loan.
Wow.
Anyway, so Els is friends with some guy from Revell, and the Revell guys complaining to him about the fact that we're going around to these manufacturers, but we're always late, and AMT guys beating us, and how are we going to get ahead of the curve? And Els Loan says, "Let's call a big meeting, and we want to form SEMA. You can help us. We'll use your place for the meeting, and maybe you can help us with the bylaws, and you'll have everybody in the room at the same time, and you can say, don't sign up with AMT, wait for us." Which is what happened.
Wow.
And that's the way SEMA was formed. And there were actually 13 companies that were the founding companies, and B&M was one of them. So
that is some serious history. That is awesome because, you look from a small group of people with the same passion, all different opinions, which is cool because your opinion equals your personality, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of personality in our business.
Oh, yeah.
But now you look, and as far as you can see here in Las Vegas, this is the largest event to come to Las Vegas every year now. And the attendance this year, everybody's back from around the world.
But it's not back like it's going to be. It's
Oh, yeah.
not
No,
back
it's-
to pre-pandemic.
I mean,
but
look
it's
where we
gonna
came
be.
from last year. And now we've got people from,
Yeah.
last year was mostly domestic, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Now you got people from, you go to grab a burger, and the guy next to you is from Saudi Arabia, the other guy's from Germany. And it's neat because but the wonderful thing about SEMA, and especially if you're a small business person, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're somebody with an idea, you can be recognized.
Yeah.
Back in the day,
yeah.
you had to work.
Yeah.
In a garage, and you're like, COD, give me cash so I can
Yeah.
pay my rent.
Yeah.
And here we are looking back at that, and SEMA continues to put so much into the spirit of motorsports.
Yeah.
And for just stuff we grow up on, it brings back memories. Like your son. He's here and developing new ways for people to see video content and things like that, and ideas. It's like a germination point for so many
yeah.
different things, but with a passion of racers. And you'll see guys arguing and like going back and forth on topics and things like that. But the spirit of relationship, I think, is a glue that
Yeah.
holds people together, and it's a thrill to have you here to unload that, because it's not only am I just thrilled because it brings me back to my very first car and thinking about going up to New England Dragway with my B&M transmission and my big block Chevelle, and I'm this big guy doing 14.1 thinking I'm a hero. But
that was okay.
that was okay back then.
Yeah.
But so what do you think looking forward to 2023? What do you see?
Well,
It's like a big wow, though. There's so much coming up.
Yeah,
People are
the
back.
problem is it depends on the politics.
Right. What do you think? What do you think about different means? Like we have Mike Copeland brought out with Bosch a hydrogen-powered Falcon. So they're putting hydrogen direct, not a fuel cell, but directly in.
As fuel.
Yes,
Yes.
which is cool.
Yes.
And
yes.
this is the second gen. The first gen, they used a Magnuson supercharger, and they put, so they pumped it in there. Now it goes directly in through a new injector from Bosch. It's really cool. They're going to race in the Optima Challenge this week. The truck from last year, the hydrogen-powered truck, will be in the Optima race, which is
that's
kind of
great.
neat.
Yeah, I mean, that would be wonderful for our industry,
And
I
then
think.
we go to the other side. Ken Block takes an electric vehicle, and he sets a record for going down the Sunset Strip, doing 360s in a very impressive Ken Block way. Which makes
He's
you go,
an amazing
I mean,
driver,
that's the new Van Nuys Boulevard, I guess,
Yeah.
from back in the day, But it's exciting, though. I think, regardless of what happens, I think the passion of the people and the connection that, having people like you find joy and camaraderie with people here, and leading other people who don't necessarily, they can get so confused with all the different ways we communicate now. Social media, the news cycle, which used to be when we grew up was, a week long. Now it's 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and trade secrets ship around the world in 30 seconds. You come up with a great idea, somebody is figuring out half your technology just by videoing, your product. So it's crazy, but it's exciting, I think.
Well, the future is always exciting.
I see some excitement in your eyes. Like, you got that racer in you. There's a competitive nature, I think. I saw it in your son, too. It's kind of like this smile going, I'm good, everything's fine.
Well, I am good, and everything is fine. No complaints.
It is a thrill to have you here. Hall of Fame member, certainly one of the guys right in the beginning of SEMA, and here we are in 2022. Set for another big year here at SEMA. Bob Spar, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate it. What a great time. This is the voice of the industry, provided to you by Hypertech, and here live every year right in the Central Hall at SEMA 2022.